Welcome back, everyone, to another incredibly crucial deep dive right here on the channel. Grab a seat, get comfortable, and make sure you are fully tuned in, because what we are unpacking today has absolutely sent shockwaves through the entire international basketball community. We are talking about a moment that had fans leaping out of their seats, throwing their hands up in pure disbelief, and flooding social media timelines with one collective, echoing question. Why? Today, we are meticulously breaking down the highly anticipated high-stakes clash between the Hiroshima Dragonflies and the Shimane Magic, a game that was supposed to be a standard, thrilling B-League showdown, but instead morphed into a masterclass of controversy, tactical mystery, and intense debate surrounding one of the most closely watched international prospects in the world today, Sotto. If you look at the title of this video, you already know the narrative that is dominating the headlines. Sotto was out. But he wasn't just taken out. He was taken out while he was visibly, undeniably, and spectacularly hot. He was in the zone, finding his rhythm, altering shots on the defensive end, running the floor with the kind of fluid agility that scouts have been drooling over for years, and finishing with authority. He was doing exactly what the Hiroshima Dragonflies brought him in to do. He was establishing the paint, creating gravity that opened up the perimeter for shooters, and asserting a level of dominance that had the Shimane Magic scrambling for answers. The crowd was roaring. The momentum was violently shifting in Hiroshima's favor, and it felt like we were on the precipice of witnessing a true breakout, legacy-building performance in a young phenom. And then the unthinkable happened. The buzzer sounded. The substitution was called. Sotto was pulled from the floor. Let that sink in for a moment. You have a player who is operating at peak efficiency, a player who has finally found that elusive groove in a highly physical and demanding league. And right when the iron is blazing hot, the coaching staff decides to pull the plug. The immediate reaction from the broadcast team, the fans in the arena, and the millions watching from the Philippines and around the globe was a mixture of profound confusion and immediate frustration. Did the coach suddenly lose trust in him? Was there a hidden injury? Did the defensive scheme change so drastically that Kai became a liability in the span of a single possession? These are the burning questions that have ignited a firestorm of speculation. It is incredibly rare in the world of professional basketball to see a coach actively disrupt his own player's rhythm, especially when that player is the primary engine driving a crucial run against a formidable conference rival like Shimane. To truly understand the magnitude of this substitution, we have to contextualize what it means to be hot in the game of basketball. It is not just about making a couple of consecutive shots. It is a psychological state. It is a physiological alignment where the game slows down, the rim looks like an ocean, and every read becomes instinctive. Sotto was in that elevated state. He was rejecting opposing drives at the rim with a ferocious timing that completely deterred Shimane's guards from penetrating the paint. On the offensive end, he was setting rock-solid screens, rolling with purpose, catching difficult entry passes in heavy traffic, and finishing softly over the outstretched arms of veteran defenders. He was not forcing the issue. He was letting the game come to him, and he was punishing every single mistake the defense made. For a young center trying to solidify his reputation and build unshakable confidence, these stretches of dominance are invaluable. They are the building blocks of a great career. So, when a coaching staff intervenes and halts that momentum, it naturally invites intense scrutiny. We have to look at the broader picture here. The relationship between a promising young big man and his head coach is always a delicate dance of development, trust, and real-time tactical adjustments. The narrative floating around right now is that this early hook indicates a fundamental lack of faith. People are arguing that if a coach truly believes in his franchise center, he lets him ride the wave, regardless of whatever rotational spreadsheet or minutes restriction was planned before the tip-off. The counter-argument, of course, is that professional basketball in the B-League is a highly sophisticated, chess-like battle of matchups, where sticking to a rigid system often trumps individual hot streaks. But when the optics are this glaring, when a player is visually dominating and then abruptly relegated to the end of the bench with a towel draped over his shoulders, the system argument becomes very hard for the passionate fan base to swallow. This game against Shimane was not just another date on the calendar. This was a statement game. The Shimane Magic have established themselves as a powerhouse, boasting incredible depth, relentless perimeter scoring, and a physical front line that tests the mettle of every team they face. For Hiroshima to climb the ranks and assert themselves as true contenders, they need Kai Sotto not just to play, but to excel in these specific, high-pressure environments. He was doing exactly that. He was rising to the occasion against top-tier competition. The fact that his masterclass was artificially cut short by his own bench has created a massive ripple effect of questions regarding the team's long-term strategy, their evaluation of his conditioning, and internal dynamics of the locker room. Throughout this comprehensive analysis, we are going completely beyond the box score. We are not just going to look at the points and rebounds. We're going to dissect the film, break down the exact sequences leading up to the substitution, analyze the body language, evaluate the defensive coverages Shimane was deploying, and try to get inside the mind of the coaching staff. Was this a catastrophic miscalculation by the coach, a stubborn adherence to a predetermined rotation, or was there a subtle, highly technical reason that justified sitting a scorching hot player? We're going to leave absolutely no stone unturned, because to understand this single moment is to understand the complex, often frustrating, and incredibly demanding journey of Kai Sotto as he navigates the rigorous landscape of professional international basketball. So, let us strip away the emotion, silence the immediate outrage, and look at the cold, hard facts of what actually transpired on that court. To fully deconstruct this situation, we must first transport ourselves back to the opening minutes of that specific quarter where Kai Sotto began his reign of terror on the Shimane defense. The game had been a gritty, back-and-forth affair. Both teams were locked in a defensive struggle, feeling each other out, testing the waters with various pick-and-roll coverages and off-ball actions. Hiroshima's offense had been somewhat stagnant, relying too heavily on perimeter isolation and settling for contested, late shot clock jumpers. It was a classic scenario where the team needed a spark, a catalyst to break the offensive deadlock, and shift the geometry of the floor. Enter Kai Sotto. When Kai was initially subbed in, you could immediately sense a shift in the spatial dynamics of the half-court set. The Shimane defenders, who had previously been comfortably extending their pressure on the perimeter, suddenly had to shrink the floor. You cannot ignore a 7'3" behemoth diving to the rim. It is a fundamental law of basketball gravity. Hiroshima's guards immediately recognized this advantage. They started orchestrating high pick-and-rolls, utilizing Kai's massive frame to wipe out the primary point of attack defenders. But what was truly spectacular wasn't just the screens. It was the sheer velocity and intent of Kai's rim runs. He wasn't just casually jogging down the lane. He was sprinting with purpose, sealing his man early, and presenting a massive, unmissable target for the lob or the pocket pass. Let us break down the offensive sequence that really set the crowd on fire. Shimane was employing a traditional drop coverage, attempting to contain the ball handler while keeping their big man back to protect the paint. Against an average center, this is a safe, conservative strategy. But Kai Sotto was reading the floor with veteran-level processing speed. On 3 consecutive possessions, he dismantled this coverage. First, he recognized the drop, slipped the screen early, caught a brilliant bounce pass in stride, and finished with a thunderous two-handed dunk that absolutely shattered Shimane's interior defensive confidence. The very next trip down the floor, Shimane tried to adjust by bringing the tagger over from the weak side. Kai read the rotation instantaneously, caught the ball in the short roll, kept the ball high away from the digging guards, and executed a flawless, soft push shot over the rotating defender. It was poetry in motion. It demonstrated touch, awareness, and supreme confidence. And it wasn't just the offensive output that defined this hot streak. We have to talk about his monumental impact on the defensive end, which is arguably what makes his sudden benching so utterly baffling. Shimane is a team that thrives on dribble penetration. They want to break the paint, force defensive collapses, and kick out to their elite shooters. During this specific stretch, Kai Sotto effectively closed the paint for business. He was operating as a one-man wrecking crew in the key. He wasn't just chasing blocks. He was demonstrating elite verticality, staying on his feet, absorbing contact, and altering trajectories without committing fouls. There was a specific sequence where Shimane's dynamic import guard drove hard downhill, looking for a familiar floater. Kai met him at the apex, timed his jump perfectly, and swatted the ball out of bounds with ferocity that sent a clear message. The defensive rebounding was equally dominant. He was securing the glass, keeping the ball high, and immediately initiating the fast break with crisp outlet passes. He was the anchor, the hub, the absolute epicenter of everything positive happening for the Hiroshima Dragonflies. So, we have established the reality of the situation. Kai Sotto was playing flawless basketball. He was executing the game plan, dominating his individual matchup, and elevating the play of everyone around him. And then the horn blows, the substitution is signaled. The coach waves him to the bench. To evaluate this decision rationally, we have to put ourselves in the shoes of the head coach and examine potential, albeit highly controversial, justifications for pulling a hot player. The most common defense for this type of move is the pre-planned rotation. In modern professional basketball, sports science and analytics heavily dictate minute distribution. Coaches and medical staffs meticulously map out a player's stint lengths to maximize energy output, prevent fatigue-induced injuries, and maintain a consistent level of intensity throughout a grueling 40-minute game. Big men, especially players of Kai's immense stature, naturally burn through energy reserves faster than guards. It takes a massive physiological toll to sprint end-to-end, battle for post position against seasoned, heavy veterans, and continuously jump to protect the rim. It is entirely possible and frankly highly probable that Kai had reached the absolute maximum threshold of his predetermined minutes for that specific stint. A coach strictly adhering to his rotational spreadsheet will look at the clock, ignore the emotional momentum of the game, and make the substitution simply because the paper says it is time. However, we must critically analyze whether strict adherence to a spreadsheet is the hallmark of championship-level coaching. The greatest coaches in the history of the sport, the ones who entitle and elevate players to legendary status, all possess a profound, intuitive feel for the flow of the game. They understand that basketball is not played on a spreadsheet. It is played by human beings driven by emotion, rhythm, and momentum. When a player catches fire, they transcend their normal physical limitations. Adrenaline takes over. The fatigue seemingly vanishes. Pulling a player during this transcendent state doesn't just rest their legs. It completely severs their psychological rhythm. By the time they check back into the game later in the quarter or the half, the magic is often gone. The defense is adjusted, the body is cooled down, and the rhythm has to be painstakingly rebuilt from scratch. Another tactical angle we must explore is a defensive matchup adjustment by Shimane. Did the Susanoo Magic change their personnel or their offensive scheme in a way that suddenly made Kai a liability? Perhaps Shimane decided to go incredibly small, substituting their traditional center for a quick, floor spacing forward, effectively forcing Kai out of the paint and into high-speed perimeter closeouts. This is a classic tactic used to neutralize dominant rim protectors. If Shimane went to a 5-out offensive look, constantly forcing Kai to defend the pick and pop at the three-point line, the coaching staff might have deduced that his lack of elite lateral quickness on the perimeter would result in open threes for the opposition. In that highly specific scenario, replacing him with a smaller, more mobile forward would be a justifiable defensive countermove, regardless of how well Kai was scoring on the other end. Yet, when we review the footage and the play-by-play data, this theory doesn't completely hold water. Shimane had not made a drastic personnel shift at the exact moment of the substitution. They were still playing relatively traditional basketball. The primary reason seems to stem from a coaching philosophy that heavily prioritizes system execution over individual brilliance. Some coaches are deeply uncomfortable when the offense devolves or evolves, depending on your perspective, in defeating one single player, even if that player is highly efficient. They want the ball to move, they want multiple sides of the floor touched, and they want every player involved in the action. If they perceive that the offense is becoming too entirely dependent on Kai Sotto, even if it is working brilliantly, they might pull him simply to force the other players to re-engage with the core offensive system. It is a controversial philosophy, often viewed as overcoaching, but it is a prevalent mindset in highly structured leagues like the B-League. But let us address the elephant in the room, the concept of trust. The title of this video asks, did the coach lose trust? Trust in basketball is multifaceted. It is not just trusting a player to make a shot. It is trusting them to manage their own fatigue, trusting them to execute complex defensive rotations when they are exhausted, and trusting them to be the focal point of the team's identity. When you bench a hot player, you're inadvertently sending a psychological signal. To the player, it can feel like a profound lack of confidence. It says, I know you are dominating right now, but I do not trust you to maintain this, or I do not trust that the style of play is ultimately going to win us the game. For a young player like Kai Sotto, who carries the weight of a nation on his shoulders and is constantly battling to prove his worth on the international stage, these psychological blows can be heavy. Confidence is a fragile commodity. Building it takes months of hard work. Shattering it can take a single, ill-timed trip to the bench. Furthermore, we have to consider the optics and the team morale. Players recognize when a teammate is carrying them. They feed off that energy. When the engine of that energy is suddenly removed, it can deflate the entire roster. You can see it in the body language of the Hiroshima guards. The dynamic, aggressive rim-attacking style they had adopted while Kai was on the floor suddenly reverted to passive, perimeter-oriented hesitation. The gravity was gone. The paint was closed again. The Shimane defense, what had been reeling and desperately trying to stop the bleeding, was suddenly given a massive, unearned reprieve. They were allowed to reset their defense, catch their breath, and recalibrate their strategy without having to actually solve the problem that Kai Sotto presented. The coach essentially solved Shimane's biggest problem for them. This brings us to a larger conversation about the evaluation of international talent in overseas leagues. There is often an implicit bias, or perhaps a different standard of leash length, applied to younger, imported players compared to local veterans. A seasoned veteran who hits 3 straight shots is almost universally allowed to ride out the quarter. A young player, however, is often kept on a meticulously tight leash, scrutinized for every minor defensive lapse, even while they are dominating offensively. Is it possible that the coach saw one singular misrotation, one slight hesitation, on a closeout amidst a sea of brilliant plays, and used that as a justification to pull him? If so, we have to question the developmental philosophy at play. Development requires allowing players to play through minor mistakes, especially when their overall impact is overwhelmingly positive. You cannot cultivate a superstar if you micromanage them into being a role player. The aftermath of this game, and specifically the substitution, will be a defining moment for the Hiroshima Dragonflies season. The media scrutiny will be intense. The coach will undoubtedly be pressed for an explanation. Will he hide behind a shield of sports science and minutes restriction? Will he offer a highly technical defensive justification, or will he admit that he misread the flow of the game? Whatever the answer, the reality remains an opportunity was heavily squandered, an opportunity to let a young giant spread his wings, dominate a formidable opponent, and secure a crucial victory. As analysts, we must ground our emotions in reality. The reality is that coaching is an incredibly difficult job, requiring split-second decisions under immense pressure. We have the luxury of hindsight, slow-motion replays, and analytical data. The coach operates in the heat of the moment. However, the best coaches are defined by their ability to feel the heartbeat of the game. On this particular night, against the Shimane system of magic, it appears the coaching staff was checking a spreadsheet instead of feeling the pulse of their own team. They had lightning in a bottle. They had a player who was comprehensively altering the fabric of the game, and they chose to put the stopper back in. This situation with Kai Sotto is a perfect microcosm of the modern basketball clash between analytics and intuition, between system rigidity and individual brilliance. It is a learning moment not just for the player, but profoundly for the coaching staff. Moving forward, the true test will be how this relationship repairs itself. Will Kai Sotto respond with frustration, or will he channel this into an even more ferocious work ethic? Will the coach learn to loosen the reins and trust his rising star when the lights are brightest? The answers to these questions will ultimately determine not only the fate of the Hiroshima Dragonflies this season, but the trajectory of Kai Sotto's promising career. As we begin to wrap up this extensive, deeply analytical breakdown, we have to take a step back and look at the massive overarching themes that this single controversial substitution has illuminated. We have dissected the X's and O's. We have analyzed the defensive coverages, the pick-and-roll efficiencies, and the psychological ramifications of benching a player who is operating at the absolute peak of his powers. What we are left with is a complex tapestry of modern professional basketball, a sport where immense talent constantly collides with rigid coaching philosophies, with the raw emotion of hot streak battles against the cold, hard logic of rotational spreadsheets, and where a young player's confidence hangs delicately in the balance of a coach's real-time decisions. The narrative that the coach simply lost trust In Kai Sotto might be the loudest and most easily digestible headline, but as we've explored today, the reality is likely far more nuanced, though arguably no less frustrating for fans. It is highly probable that this decision was rooted in a predetermined game plan, a stubborn adherence to minute restrictions, or an over-analytical fear of a potential matchup disadvantage that hadn't even materialized yet. However, explaining the why does not excuse the outcome. In the relentless pursuit of executing a perfect system, the coaching staff seemingly forgot the most fundamental rule of competitive sports. When a player gives you an overwhelming, unstoppable advantage, you ride that advantage until the opponent proves they can stop it. Shimane was not stopping Kai Sotto. Hiroshima stopped Kai Sotto. And that is a pill that is incredibly difficult for the basketball community to swallow. For Kai, this is undoubtedly a test of extreme mental fortitude. The journey of an international prodigy playing overseas is never a linear path to superstardom. It is fraught with cultural adjustments, language barriers, immense pressure from a passionate home country, and the daunting task of earning the unshakable trust of foreign coaches. Moments like these, being pulled when you know you're the best player on the floor, can breed deep resentment if not handled correctly, but they can also forge an unbreakable resilience. True professionals, the ones who eventually conquer these leagues and reach the pinnacle of the sport, learn to control what they can control. Kai cannot control the substitution patterns. He can only control his preparation, his effort on the glass, his defensive intensity, and his absolute readiness for the next time his number is called. If he responds to this adversity not with sulking, but with a renewed, undeniable ferocity that forces the coach's hand in the future, then this frustrating moment will simply be a footnote in a massive success story. But what about you, the viewers? This channel is built entirely on our collective passion for the game and our commitment to breaking down these crucial moments with the depth they deserve. I have laid out the tactical analysis, the psychological angles, and the harsh realities of the B-League coaching landscape. Now, I want to hear your voice. I need you to flood the comment section below. Do you buy the argument that this was just strict sports science and a pre-planned rotation? Do you think the coach genuinely panicked and overcoached the situation? Or do you believe there's a deeper underlying lack of trust between the staff and Kai Sotto? Give me your most detailed breakdowns. Tell me where you think I was spot on, and tell me where you think I might have missed the mark. The debate down. There's always the best part of these videos. If you appreciate this level of unapologetic, deep dive basketball analysis, where we don't just read the box scores, but actually watch the film and question the narratives, then please make sure you hit that like button right now. It is the single best way to support the channel and push this video out to the rest of the basketball world. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. We are tracking every movement, every game, and every storyline in the world of international basketball, and you do not want to miss a single breakdown. Looking ahead, the pressure on the Hiroshima Dragonflies is now at a boiling point. The media will be asking questions. The fans will be watching every single substitution with eagle eyes. And the coaching staff is going to have to prove that their system can yield victories even when they purposefully handicap their own momentum. As for Kai Sotto, the lights are only going to get brighter. The next time he steps onto the hardwood, everyone will be waiting to see how he responds to the leash. Will he play with hesitation? Or will he play with a vengeance? Thank you all so much for tuning in, for your incredible passion, and for being a part of this amazing community. Keep watching the games, keep analyzing the plays, and never stop questioning the decisions on the sideline. Would you like me to analyze any other specific player performances or coaching decisions from this week's B-League matchups? Let me know. Until next time, stay passionate, stay analytical, and I will see you in the next deep dive.